Dr. Neha Badhavan is there. Professor R.V. Bhagat is there. Ms. Bhavna Sri Krishna Chopra is also there, and Professor Pushpendra Kumar Singh, I can see clearly. So a very warm welcome to all the panelists, and we are looking forward to a very, very interesting and stimulating dialogue today set up by the India Center for Migration. So once again, a very warm welcome to you all.
Amit, can you just switch off your microphone and camera?
Actually, Surabhi, if I may be allowed to say, the lighting on your side is a little weak. I think if you can look at the lighting, it would be better. That is the we have to switch off all the phones straight away now.
Yes.
We are barely, we are almost on time, so kindly switch off all the things. I would like to share a message with the panelists. I hope they are hearing me. Can all the panelists confirm?
I'm sure, sir, everybody can hear you.
Yeah, so first of all, once again, a very warm welcome. I have been advised by ICM that with your cooperation, we'll make it a great dialogue. As you know, it all depends on our own discipline. I can assure you I will be very brief and succinct. My request would be that each panelist kindly take about 12 minutes to make your opening remarks, which will give us enough time for questions and discussion. And when you're about 1 or 2 minutes short, I will find a way to remind you so that within about 2 minutes therefrom, you kindly conclude your presentation in a very nice manner. Thank you very much. I can see the secretaries coming in.
Yes, sir. So we'll now start.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So at the outset, what I will request and reiterate again is that except the main speakers, all others, please keep your microphones on mute and cameras also on mute. When one panelist is speaking, the others are requested to keep their microphones on mute mode so that we can hear what people are saying clearly. If we find that somebody's microphone is working, then we'll have to centrally mute it. So we'll mute it from our end if you do not mute from your end. So we just wanted to flag that up front. And secondly, we have allocated time for discussion towards the end. So the moderator would go as per order and listen to your views. And additionally, you may also use the group chat option to type in your questions, which we'll be passing on. With those few logistical announcements, I'll now welcome Secretary CPV and OIA, our Chairman, and PG Shri Amrit Lagun, JSOIA 1, Shri Yogeshwar Sangwan, our esteemed panel, moderated by Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, officers from the MEA who have joined us, and other friends and colleagues. Welcome to this important discussion. Without wasting much time, I'll now request our Secretary to make his welcome remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Surabhi. Am I online?
We can hear you.
Surabhi, am I online? Yes, can I come on?
Yes, please, sir. Yeah. Go ahead.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This coronavirus is really creating a new normal. So we have to learn how to renegotiate and re-engage. And the ways in which we interact with each other seems to have changed very much. One of the lessons that I've learned in the last few weeks is that in these challenging times, we have to find new ways to stay ahead of the curve. Let me at the outset mention that we are delighted that the India Center for Migration, a research think tank of the Ministry of External Affairs, has organized this virtual discussion. And I would wish to congratulate my colleague, Joint Secretary Yogeshwar Sangwan, and the Chief Administrative Officer of ICM, Surbhi Singh, for putting this together. Before I start, I thought I would like to share with you some of my thoughts on three issues of the context in which we could look at rearranging the post-COVID world and also our relations with the Gulf region in particular. The first thought that came to my mind, which I wanted to share with you, was that there seems to be an intimate linkage between technology, skills, and migration. And this will drive our development imperatives, both at the national as well as the regional or global level, as well as the understandings that we will have over a period of time. On the technology front, there will be a quest for excellence and innovation. The quest for markets may not cease, but I think it may need some review. And some of this may come about, emerge from the more dispersed production centers and new supply chains that may emerge. The second one is that skills may become more important in the new era, as they provide a mechanism in which one can adapt to the changing circumstances. And mobility will be a very key aspect of this adjustment. Not just a working from a remote location, work from home kind of a situation, but also in terms of how capital and organizations will need to be readjusted. The centrality of human beings, I think, has become very obvious during this pandemic, and the curbs that we have had to impose on ourselves have brought new realizations. The adjusting of our natural migration behavior and the trends in this would become a new area of inquiry. The second issue that I wanted to share with you was that about our immigration policy. In India, it's marked by a twofold approach. It has the facilitation of safe and legal migration, and B, it tries to provide, or rather safeguard, the welfare of the overseas Indians. As you probably know, there is a new bill, the new immigration bill, which is in the making currently. The Ministry of External Affairs, as the nodal ministry for this particular aspect, has been taking concrete measures for the protection of the Indian migrant workers abroad. Pre-departure orientation training was something that we had introduced to bring about soft skills before the migrant worker goes. And this is particularly relevant for the immigration clearance required countries, where many of the migrant workers do not have a high level of education. The mandatory Pravasi Bharatiya Bima Yojana is another one which provides some sort of cover and insurance for such workers. We have worked out a number of migration and mobility agreements with the Gulf Cooperation countries, and these provide an overarching framework for our bilateral dialogue. And we are trying to have these agreements with other countries as well. For instance, with Malaysia, where we have a large number of people, and also for some of the countries in the Western Hemisphere, in the EU, for instance, where highly skilled professionals are going in large numbers. From the welfare perspective, we have started a scheme of the Pravasi Bharatiya Sahayata Kendra, which has been established both in India as well as in some of the countries overseas, which provide real-time information to workers who might have issues. And then, of course, we have grievance redressal mechanisms, for instance, the Madad portal or the e-migrate portal, where we can provide assistance to the migrant workers. And of course, you are familiar with the India Community Welfare Fund, which has been constituted specifically for those who are distressed when they are overseas and may not have the means to provide for themselves, and therefore this fund provides for them. The third issue, gentlemen, that I wanted to share with you was that This COVID-19 pandemic has somehow become like a defining feature of our policy and administrative decision-making process, both in India and in several other countries overseas. Countries across the world have taken measures aimed at curtailing the spread of the virus by restricting mobility and implementing social distancing. The COVID-19 pandemic has brought economic activities in many countries to a halt or restricted in many ways, and this has happened in the Gulf as well. Lockdowns have been imposed, red, orange, green zones are being created. As I said, many economic activities have been suspended, and the attempt is to save human lives. And now we are in the process where we are trying to see how we can revive economic activity as well. And during this process, we have seen the movement of migrant workers. We've seen this very pronounced in our own country, in India, and of course, this is happening in the Gulf and other parts of the world as well. The government of India, this has been a whole of government approach with the Ministry of External Affairs, the Ministry of Home Affairs, the Ministry of Civil, Aviation, Health, and the state governments have together come to a common platform in which we have undertaken what is known as the Vande Bharat mission of bringing back those Indians who are in distress overseas. It's a monumental exercise, perhaps the largest that we have undertaken since independence. And the repatriation is being carried out in phases, and we are adding more and more countries. As you know, we had 12 countries in the first phase, and the second phase, which will begin from next week, will have a total of about 31 countries, but we might be able to add on a few more countries into this ambit. And the focus has been on those who had the most compelling reason, the elderly, those who require urgent medical care, students, of course, distressed workers who lost their jobs or have had their visas cancelled. A lot of this is actually happening in the Gulf. And so if we look at the India-Gulf movements, of course, it's a civilizational exchange. But I think if you look at it in the contemporary times, it is something that has had a very significant development impact on both sides, both in India as well as the countries of the Gulf. And at the same time, while it has contributed to the development of the Gulf countries, they have had very significant impact, for instance, in terms of the remittances of the employees of the Gulf. It's about 50% of the overall that is sent to India. But I think also at the same time, we see that the workers who go to the Gulf imbibe and live with a new set of skills, which is more contemporary and more updated. We have also noticed that in terms of the India-Gulf movements, there has been a shift in terms of occupational and skill profile of the Indian migrants. And while there are many who belong to the relatively low and semi-skilled categories, for instance, drivers, artisans, construction workers, domestic workers, we also have a very large and growing number of highly skilled professionals who are going to the Gulf. For instance, doctors, healthcare workers, IT professionals, teachers, people in the judicial services, and so on. And so when we look at the current situation, I see the return of the people from the Gulf happening essentially in two phases. The first is directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of them are in desperation and wish to come back. But I think there's another one, which is the one that is associated with the overall economic downturn, which is both a global phenomenon as well as something that is happening in the Gulf. And therefore, the inward migration from the Gulf region, and this is going to perhaps in fairly large quantum, may bring about a certain associated loss of remittances for their families. At the same time, we would like to see this also as an opportunity. And I see this as an opportunity, particularly in two contexts. As I had mentioned earlier, a lot of the people coming back from the Gulf have very special skills. And so we are trying to see how these skills can be matched to the development aspirations within our country today. And this would apply both to the governmental development programs as well as the private sector, which soon after this lockdown comes to an end, will look for new energy and vitality. And these highly skilled people who are coming back from the Gulf could become a source for that. And in order to facilitate the process, you are probably familiar, we have a platform known as the eMigrate. And in the eMigrate, we track the workers who are going to the ECR countries, primarily in the Gulf. And so we are using the database of those who are returning to tell each state where these workers are coming back, as to there are so many masons or construction workers or carpenters or different types of artisans who are coming back to their state. So that, and we are sharing this data both with the state governments as well as with the Ministry of Skills, so that this can become a database that can be used as we ease into the next phase. And we would expect that this database can be shared with the private sector as well, so that they can use this effectively. So I do not wish to take up more time. This is a very interesting project that the India Center for Migration has taken up. We will be having a monthly session, as Surabhi might have told you already. But before I conclude, I must welcome the panelists and all the participants. And we feel particularly privileged that Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, a distinguished fellow at the Gateway House, former Director General at the Indian Council of World Affairs, and a most distinguished diplomat who has been a guru to most of us who are in service today, is moderating this very distinguished panel. So I look forward to the proceedings, because we do hope that your discussions will provide us with some kind of ideas as to how we go forward in dealing with this situation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Now I would ask Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia to take over. So we have 1 hour for the discussion and then half an hour for the Q&A, which follows later. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, Surabhi. I would like to begin sincerely by thanking Shri Sanjay Bhattacharya, Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, who is handling very important portfolios such as CPV and Overseas Indian Affairs. This initiative by India Center for Migration and by MEA is greatly appreciated, because this is exceptionally important and it is timely. It is really helping us to reflect on issues of public interest, issues which are really of national importance. I think Shri Bhattacharya has already laid out the contours of this very complex subject in a very succinct and clear manner, and that makes, I think, our task fairly straightforward and simple. It is indeed true that the media is talking a great deal about Vande Bharat mission, but what happens when the returnees land in India? That is where the story of this program begins, because clearly it's very important that they are brought in a dignified, comfortable, safe manner. But what happens then? That is what the subject is all about. I'm particularly grateful that ICM has been able to gather together experts of domain experts, top domain experts in our country, and it is for their consideration. I want to very briefly put out two aspects of this problem, which are very clearly interrelated and yet very distinct. One is the issue of the point from where these people are coming. Here we are not talking of the world as such, we are talking about the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council countries, and we probably need to reflect a little bit, deliberate a little bit as to what are the factors which has triggered this return. Already Secretary has referred to that. We also should probably look at a little bit about the numbers that are involved, the numbers from which countries and numbers of people going to which states. I think that basic factual position is very important, because then only we would be able to develop the kind of program that we have in mind. And then on the other side, on the Indian side, I think it's very important to note that we are seeing this not as a crisis, we are seeing it as an opportunity, as was just pointed out. I think we need to recall how when an Indian with skills, either high skills or low skills, was seen leaving India, he was seen to be representing brain drain. But now when he's coming back to India, I think it's only logical that it should be seen as brain gain for India. So we need to keep that second aspect in mind as well. So it is in this slide, questions which are galore for our experts are really to look at not just these two aspects, but all the aspects which Secretary has just spelled out in the broad framework of technology, migration and skills, and in light of all the facilities and platforms which are already in operation. The central issue now is how the skills and assets of the returnees can be put to good use for the country, and also in a way where the 3 R's are fully taken care of. And I'm really referring to essentially rehabilitation, resettlement, and reintegration of the returning Indians. So with these initial remarks, essentially meant to stimulate discussion, I shall now go forward with the my invitation to each panelist one by one in the same order in which ICM has given me the list of the names of our top experts. May I therefore now request Dr. Neha Vadhavan, National Project Coordinator, ILO, Delhi, to take the floor, so to say.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Bhatia. A very good afternoon, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this panel. It's a pleasure to be here and take part in this very important discussion. I'm very glad to also be amongst very, very renowned and well-known people who have worked in this field, Professor Bhagat, Professor Pushpendra, and also I think MEA official Secretary Bhattacharya, Mr. Lugun, I can see Mr. Sangwan as well there. It's really a pleasure to be here and talk about some of the issues that emerge in front of us in light of the COVID pandemic. I'd like to start by congratulating the Ministry of External Affairs for their commendable efforts at repatriating Indians through the Vande Bharat mission. I think we've really sort of set an example to the entire world in terms of bringing our citizens back. And right now, of course, we're giving priority to certain cases.
Are you getting some coffee for me?
We'll be giving priority to specific cases, but as we all know, there will be slowly workers also being brought back in. So what I will do today is refer back to the concept note that was circulated, and there were some issues that were flagged in the concept note around which the discussion was expected to sort of move forward. So I'm going to refer to some of those issues and make my presentation accordingly. So I think one of the first issues was looking at the numbers and return of Indian migrant workers in the Gulf. Now, the ILO organized a meeting and some MEA officials, the POEs, did manage to attend that meeting on the 29th of April. And it was a very successful meeting where we came up with a range of suggestions in terms of how this work could be looked at. But one of the important aspects of that discussion was also to try and understand what is the magnitude of returnees that we are looking at, right? And in this situation, during that discussion, there were estimates varying between 5 to 7.5 lakhs. Now, of course, there is data on ECR migrant workers. While ECNR migrant workers, the data is necessary, however, it's unavailable. Now, in this kind of a situation, one has to sort of depend on ECR rates, migration rates, to try and understand what are the areas and what are the kinds of workers that will be coming back. Now, we do have a list of top 50 districts where ECR migration is high from, and I would actually fathom a guess to say that these districts would be popular returned destinations as well. But numbers are difficult to come by, and in a related sort of way, this issue had also come up in a meeting that the ILO had organized in October last year, where we were also talking with the Bureau of Immigration, and it came up that in India we do not collect data on visa type upon return, right? And this was a suggestion that actually went forward, which is to say that in the data that is being collected upon return, it would be interesting and important to actually collect data on what type of visa the migrant worker is returning on, right? In addition to perhaps some information on skill. Now, I know already for a fact that in Nepal they're beginning to do this, that upon return, especially in the COVID crisis, but in general, there is a system that is being put in place, which is to collect information on type of visa as well as the type of skill set that the workers have available to them when they return. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the challenges to repatriation and rehabilitation and the recommendations that can come thereof. Now, what is emerging very clearly is that some sectors have been much more adversely affected than others. We are hearing that construction has been impacted. We are also hearing that the oil and natural gas sector is being impacted. But I'd also like to sort of flag here that there are certain sectors that are then witnessing increased demand. So we can see the health sector, and this is something that the Secretary also referred to, that we can see that health workers will be in growing demand, and India actually plays a very, very pivotal role in terms of the health workforce that exists beyond our borders as well. And I think this is really an area to consolidate and think carefully in terms of how we want to proceed and perhaps position ourselves in terms of the health sector. Another sector which has been observed to not be affected by economic crisis is the domestic work sector. So I think it's really important to gender our policies, to actually look at the nuances in terms of what types of workers will return in larger numbers and where the demand will go down. And then thereof also what sectors the demand is expected to perhaps go up, and how we are going to strategize to perhaps meet these demands. And related to that perhaps would also be to urge you to mull over the issue of certain restrictions that are there on certain categories of workers. Now I know that the Immigration Management Bill is under preparation, and we're very close to seeing it being presented in the Parliament. But I think these are aspects that really need to be considered at this moment of time, because I think extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures, and I think one really must approach the issue of skill sets and the types of workers and the type of migration one sees from India, and to look at intermediation, of course, but to look at also how one can promote safe migration for certain types of vulnerable workers. The ILO, in its meeting on the 29th of April, also the report comes up with a categorization based on the discussions. And I'll be happy to circulate that report amongst the participants here at the discussion. But the idea is to basically look at certain categories of workers. We tried to categorize into 7 categories, the different types of workers facing different types of difficulties in the destination. And suggested 5 categories that actually need immediate attention. These categories, of course, start with undocumented workers, and followed by workers who are working on short-term employment contracts via employment visas. The work has been completed and are awaiting pending dues to return. They also include workers who reach the destination on employment visas and are staying at shelters provided by manpower agencies, destination recruitment agencies, but need to return due to unfulfilled contracts as projects have been shelved due to the COVID outbreak. There are also cases where the employment has been terminated due to the COVID outbreak, and these workers have no access to cash, food, safe accommodation, and health facilities with physical distancing, which is necessary to be provided by the employer on site. There is also no promise of re-employment after the lockdown restrictions are lifted, and I think these workers really need to be prioritized. Some workers have been put on compulsory unpaid leave due to the COVID outbreak, and they too have no access to cash, food, safe accommodation. So these are the certain types of categories, I think, which can be prioritized in terms of who needs to be brought back and who really needs the support, even in terms of repatriation costs that are to be incurred. I'd also like to raise one more point around point-to-point repatriation, and this came up in discussions and has been coming up repeatedly, that workers will need to go back to the districts that they come from. And this point-to-point repatriation will require the assistance and the coordination with the state government to ensure that others are not at risk to infection and the workers themselves are also protected in the course of their transition from the destination back to the source state. Right? I was also trying to think about the issue of, there's one issue that has come up in a very big way, and the ILO has heard several complaints about it, which is that there is the whole issue of non-payment of wages, right? One can see a very big way. There are workers, and just of course again in the discussion that took place, the DOE did put this forward that RAs must workers in getting their dues before they return to the country, because once they come back, and Mr. Yadav had actually pointed out very, very that this is really important for them to help in the current context before they return and these are taken up from the source country side, which are much more difficult. So I think provision of legal aid, provision of support. I know our embassies also stretched in terms of the efforts that they are making. But I think keeping migrant workers' rights at the center is important, really, to look at rehabilitation and resettlement efforts that will be made in the immediate future as well as in the slightly longer term. With non-payment of wages, there is the question of termination of contract, right? But I would like to then therefore suggest that and also there are lots of agencies that I presume are present here, that is it possible that because we are talking of skill matching as well, to encourage these workers to bring back experience certificates from their employers, because this will really help in understanding the kind of experience, the kind of skill set that they have, right? And if there are claims in the long term about non-payment of dues, beyond the COVID crisis, this is something that can be used perhaps as evidence to say that these workers have worked and perhaps their payments have not been made. I'm now going to talk a little bit about return migration and the potential for government schemes.
Just in about 2 minutes, please.
Sure. I'll finish in 2 minutes. Thank you. I think skill matching, like the Secretary also said, it's very, very important. And I think we must tap into the skills that are coming back from the Gulf. Now, one thing I'd like to point is that while we must tap into the skills, we must not forget the role of labor intermediation, because given the COVID crisis, and we know in our own country that there is much more supply of labor than in terms of ways, in terms of opportunities to accommodate this labor. So labor intermediaries really play an important role, and many of our recruitment agencies also place internally, and I think them to be involved in the skill matching process would be very, very vital to move forward in an effective manner. The UP government, I understand, has released a skill matching app, and this is a very welcome step. But to also think, I think, of public employment programs, skilled public employment programs, which can perhaps build on rural infrastructure. We know many of the workers that are coming back have skills in plumbing, construction, etc. And I think this would really be an opportunity for us to tap on, to channelize their skills, to really, build a rural Indian infrastructure, which one can hark about. Right? So I think it's really, really important to think about how one can usefully redirect some of these workers, returnee workers, into schemes. Now, I'd also like to talk a little, just sort of, point to the MGNREGA and the fact that the 9th list under the Act talks about crisis situations under which certain types of work can actually be allowed, right? So this is of course an unskilled public employment program, but there are schemes which we have existing in our system which can be tweaked, and we can try and see how many of these workers can be accommodated through existing schemes and otherwise. I'd just like to also just end by saying that at the ILO we work with several partners at the grassroots level, especially in areas which are very high migration zones, right, where many people come from. They migrate within the country as well as beyond the borders of our country. And I think this is an area that we must work together, and I would like to extend my support on behalf of the ILO to strengthen the work that we do at the community level to link some of these returnees with the schemes that the Government of India will be announcing in the near future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neha Vadhavan, for making a case for a highly nuanced approach on this complex subject. Clearly, ILO is doing a great job, and I'm sure you will be helping the authorities in a big way as we collaborate in a close manner. Thank you so much. May I now invite Professor R.B. Bhagat, who is from the International Institute of Population Studies, Mumbai, to please take the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Bhatia. I'm very glad to be here, and it is a nice opportunity to interact and share the ideas. My concern at this moment to look at whole issue of migration from the point of view of development. We have been looking at from the point of view of governance, but I understand that this is right time, right opportunity that we look at the whole issue of migration, return migration from the point of view of development. So what will be our approach and how our approach should differ from the previous approach? So fundamentally, when we look at development, when development takes place, there is a more production of goods and services, capital flows, and labor also, migration also takes place. And with this, migration becomes part of the development. But we generally, you argue and see the concerns or views or the policy making that migration is a development failure. And here is a perspective which needs to be emphasized, that migration is not that something can be attributed to development failure, but it is part of the development. And secondly, when development takes place, we have a lot of concentration of economic activities and also concentration of population. When we have two types of concentration of economic activity and concentration of population, the form of settlement changes. And that form of settlement, we call it city. And city becomes mega city. So this is how the development manifests in terms of places. And we need to see that places are important along with the people and household. The second important is that how places are connected. That we don't see in our policy making. And as a result, now we see the problem. Something happens in Delhi, it affects Bihar. Something happens in Maharashtra or Mumbai, it greatly affects Uttar Pradesh. So how places are connected, and migration provides a very good perspective of connecting the places. And connecting the places should be part of the policy.
Ian speaking is 4:30, right? Okay.
Migration connects the place. And along with migration, we have return migration. So migration and return migration are two conceptually related concepts. This has been given that any stream has a counter stream. Although migration is a bigger stream, stronger stream, and the reverse migration, return migration is counter stream, weaker stream. And we find in our study, several studies, that at any point of time we have something like 1/3, 1/4 to 1/3 of the stock belongs to the return migrants. So stock of migrant and its ratio, if you take with return migrant forms about 1/4 to 1/3 of this ratio. But what happens in this crisis situation? In crisis situation, this ratio gets changed. Return migration becomes larger, and therefore it is a shock type of situation. And how we can deal with this is a question. Then third important thing is in migration understanding or in policy making, that migration is not a monolithic process. There are issues related with voluntary migration, there are issues related with forced migration. Now the situation that has cropped up, that people are moving from cities to villages or people are coming from Gulf countries to India, this is a situation of forced migration. So forced versus voluntary migration, and then this interacts with several other aspects like skills. Some are skilled, some are less skilled, some are more educated, some are less educated, gender, ethnicity, all these factors comes into. So there is a issue of this, not a monolithic, but it is a diversified group. But also we find that in our policy making or in our academic circle understanding, migration issue doesn't come in prominence, and it comes as a some way indirectly. So it is not a problem of migration, but it is a problem of poverty, poor. So we should deal with the people who are poor. So urban poor now wants to go to villages, not the migrant. We look at this problem as informal sector, problem of the informal sector. So this is of course right, but the dimension of space and place that also needs to be incorporated, and migration becomes, or migratory status becomes one of the sections along with we can evaluate the precarity and vulnerability. Now jobs in urban area or in the modern sector becoming very, very informal. Along with informality, we have precarity, very uncertain jobs, and this creates the vulnerability. This is true for the internal migrant, this is partly true for international migrants, and therefore in the policy making, these aspects of vulnerability, precarity should be built into and integrated with development. So my argument is, or I like to plea for the idea that there is a time, this is a very opportune time that we should move from the perspective of governance to the perspective of development, where migration can be integrated into development process, and migration should not be recognized in policy making that it is a development failure. So with this perspective, what we find, what is happening in our understanding, that we have serious lack of data. The question is raised, who are coming, who are returning? Absolutely we know very little who are returning, because our data system, the existing data system, does not incorporate migration as an issue of the labor market. And one of the examples is that our periodic employment and unemployment survey by the national NSSO, which has collected data in 2007-2008, and later on We don't have data. And on that basis, on the basis of 2007, 2008, I like to put before you that those who are returning, I told that some people are returning always, because return migration is a part of also a counter stream of the migration. So what this NSSO data 2007, 2008 says, that people are returning, 60% returning from the Gulf country. Out of this 60%, 40% return to Kerala only. And those who are returning, coming from lower economic class, some scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and low scale. These people are returning. So this is what is the profile is there. But how many are returning? We are not knowing. And therefore the government portal, e-migrate portal, or those who have registered now, that 6,000 to 7,000 people have registered to return, and majority of them will be returning to Kerala, and also many will be returning to UP and Bihar also in these states. There has been change in the immigration pattern in the recent time, that those traditional states like Kerala, Gujarat, Tamil Nadu, or Punjab, there is a movement from these states to the poorer states like UP and Bihar. From there also, large number of people have migrated. Now they are going to return. Many of them are likely to return. How many are likely to return? That government can provide through this registration system, can provide. As Secretary has rightly said, they are going to share this information with the state government and various ministries. Now these states, UP, Bihar, they don't have experience of dealing with such a shock of return migration. So therefore, there is a lesson, there is a learning from Kerala model. Kerala has experienced this type of return migration in 1998 also, when there was a Gulf War. And Kerala is a state which is much more advanced in dealing with these aspects and other aspects also, education, health, and even fighting with COVID also. Kerala has been now has become successful, and it presented a successful model. So what did Kerala do? Kerala started the Department of Non-Resident Keralite Affairs, NORCA, in 1996.
Just in about 2 minutes, please.
Yes, sir. I will finish in 2 minutes. So NORCA was one experiment, and this, along with other civil society organizations, there are a number of NGOs working for migrants, return migrants in Kerala. So this type of institution building should also be promoted in states like UP and Bihar, where we have institutional mechanism at the government level. Migrants, return migrants, they must form their association. Civil society should partner and help each other. Along with that, we have to revisit our model of rural development. Our rural development is very, very target oriented, and there is a household approach. There is a approach of place, space and place is missing. But we have certain programs that needs to be revised, and these programs are, one program is Pura, providing urban amenities to rural area. That has later become Urban Mission. Now it is called Syama Prasad Mukherjee Urban Mission. This provides an integrated approach of developing villages connecting with the adjacent town. Village and township will form a complex. Connectivity will be provided. Road connectivity, internet connectivity, market connectivity, all connectivity provided. So this type of spatial approach, space and place approach can lead to certain types of formation of industrial, agricultural complexes depending upon the opportunity of that particular area. Now, what is happening in our policies and programs? In our policies and program, we are too much centralized, and one size fits all. That is the slogan. But that, I think, we need to change our perspective. One size fits all is not going to work. We have certain differentiated and diversity-oriented situations are there, but we have certainly to learn from each provinces, each places, and that should be integrated in our perspective. And this can lead to change from the point of view of governance to the point of view of development. So I see it is a great opportunity also, although crisis, but there is an opportunity. But our policy and program need to focus in a different way, integrating with development, integrating migration issues with development. So with this, I stop here, and if necessary, I will express my views later.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your very valuable contribution. You have put across your conceptual and theoretical perspective in the beginning, and then you shifted on to talk about the practical aspects, and like Nehaji, you also underlined the data issue, the lack of data issue, and I'm very happy that you have focused on the recent shift in terms of the origin of migration and therefore the destination of returnees, probably from south to north in India, and we can discuss this further later. Thank you very much. May I now invite Ms. Bhavna Sri Krishna Chopra, who is the General Manager and Head Skills Development in CII. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, sir. Am I audible to all?
Yes, yes.
Yes. I'm just going to put up a small little presentation on the basis of which I will base this discussion on. Is this visible?
Not yet.
Okay. Okay, so let me just then talk on the practical aspects and what we at CII have been grappling with. We're obviously in discussions with a lot of the state governments on this issue, but more importantly, and I'll come from a completely different perspective from the other panelists, is that we are in touch and discussion with industry as it looks to resume production post-lockdown. Now, everyone is aware of the challenges that the workers have gone back, and the industry is finding it difficult to source workers. Industry is also distinctly expressing its views and its strategy to sort of move into a higher skill set requirement, move more into automation and robotics, for which means that, and I talk about Industry 4.0, and I don't mean just very high-end IT skills, but the ability to function on high-end welding machines, the ability to do high-end better plumbing, better electricians, so things like that. And the industry is talking about requirements around that and a massive need for reskilling and upskilling of the existing workforce as well as the workforce that exists in India at this point of time. Having said that, and Sir Ambassador, so you've been talking about this whole opportunity that this crisis presents, and it came from the Chinese characters for crisis, that opportunity and danger. That's what crisis presents. As the migrants come back from international destinations, it's important, and this is what we feel that could be a view, way forward for them. One is a short-term, immediate way, and the other is, of course, a more long-term view. The long-term, of course, a lot of them will be able to go back, as things resume. And we've seen, I've read in the papers today that Europe is already looking to figure out how to open up its borders so that tourism can restart. But so keeping that aside, we see that new needs are coming in from for the long term from other destinations. So Australia, Japan are expressing their need for, and I think Dr. Neha had mentioned that right up front, the need for healthcare professionals, the need for high-end, as well as
Shakir, he had sent an email which probably also had a copy of Vote Verbal for consular access. So, forward that
Sanjay,
to,
could you
GCC.
just kindly switch off your microphone, please? If it is possible. Yeah. Thank you. Yes.
So, yeah. So, and we find this need for also mechanics and people who will be able to work on larger vehicles, whether it's Japan. And CI is already doing work under the TITP program of Japan and sending people over there. There's also this need now arising from other countries for higher end workers as well, whether it comes to IT, and that is a well-established demand and it will continue. But so in the long term, what I see is this opportunity to be able to map out quickly the skill sets of the returning migrants. Even if the experience certificates are there or no, we have access to tools and technologies which can map out their skills up to certain standards, identify the gaps as per what is required, say in Australia or Japan. For instance, Japan requires the knowledge of Japanese language. That is a 3 to 6 month process that can take place and is taking place right now as we speak. So before the lockdown as well. So you train them up to the standard that they are required to go to. We don't see so much intervention needed for technical skills over here. It will be more on the softer and the cultural aspects. And then work out ways to redeploy them. Australia and Japan are open immediately, and then the other countries will also start opening up. So that's the long-term view, and that's another opportunity. We are talking to the Kerala government on this as well. The immediate opportunities as industry talks about its need for higher-end skills. And if we can aggregate this database that is coming in and map out the skill set, we as CI are very happy to facilitate that interaction with the industry and link them to the kind of jobs that are available. So, Ambassador, just as an example, you know, we're all seeing this with these eyes of doom, the pandemic, but 400 new opportunities which we have opened up, and these are 400 concrete jobs. The number is small, yes, compared to the Indian population size, but at the same time, I'm about a new opportunity that seems to be coming up. These all work from home opportunities that are available, and these are jobs that have come up. The organizations are happy to reconsider whether this can become a permanent thing over a period of time, or it can just continue, or they'll need to come back to work in 3 to 6 months. So at this point of time also, we have aggregated demand of, you know, more than 5,000 companies who are, there are about 25,000-30,000 jobs with us, where CI is facilitating the placement. And a lot of this is coming up for higher end skills at this point of time. So, and this is where the returning migrant can fit in. Yes, he or she may not get paid in the short term as much as he was getting paid, but at this point of time, at least there would be a viable employment opportunity, is the way we are seeing it. So we have started doing this work. We are working on this. We have also done international collaborations with technical and knowledge training partners, whether it is in tourism, hospitality, kitchen services, hotel services, logistics. So Industry 4.0, we see logistics moving towards the whole high end of spectrum. And we are in discussions with Denmark and they're happy to come in and skill people. And again, we can facilitate. Finland is talking about welders and a requirement of welders that they need. It's only because of the whole COVID thing that it came to a standstill. So now construction workers who are coming back from the Middle East can easily be upskilled and facilitated for employment for Finland or European Union. And this is where the ministry's directions and inputs could be focused on. But it is not my place to say what the policy interventions, because I'm not an expert in that, but I can tell you what the industry requires, where the employment opportunities are, and these are just some of them. Thank you.
Extremely useful, very practical presentation you have made, Bhavna ji. I think we know you represent the National Apex Chamber, which has wealth of industry-related knowledge, and I think you have made some very interesting. You brought some very interesting insights here by pointing out that the short-term opportunities exist on a wide spectrum. Obviously, this is the technology or Industry 4 era already, and therefore there would be more needs in the higher end of spectrum. But it's also important that some other countries are approaching you and requesting you to find workers for them, and therefore this is something that I'm sure our authorities would very much like to take into consideration. I think there would need to be probably some further focused dialogue between ICM and CII on a sector and industry basis to reach some further very concrete conclusions. Thank you very much for your contribution. May I now request Professor Pushpendra Kumar Singh, who is very much a major figure at the center of the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and the center is based in Patna, to kindly address all of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhatia. At this stage, we have no idea about how many migrants will come from Gulf countries, because the numbers which at present we have and the plan for the first two phases which we have doesn't give us a clear indication whom the government is going to bring back to the country. I think this will depend more on the approach of the host countries, whether they want the immigrants to go back or they want to retain some of them. I think the scenario looks a little bleak because of the oil economy going down, and also the problems which the migrants presently they are facing in Gulf countries. I have some idea about the problems because perhaps people are in connection with their home, with their families here, and some of the information which we are getting from their families from the field, I would like to share with the panel here and all the people in the audience. First thing is that there is the fear which is there amongst the migrants, because in some countries the infection rate is quite high. I think Qatar has one of the highest infection rates in the world. So the workers who are there, and we know that the condition in which these workers they live in very say camp accommodation where many workers they share a room. So all these the physical distancing and all say the important say precautions related to personal hygiene, these are perhaps not possible in these conditions. So there is a fear amongst workers. There are many workers who have become jobless, and they are just waiting for some rescue or evacuation from there. They have no work. Also there are issues of even wages which the workers fear, because many workers they normally get paid at the end of their tenure or after every few months. So it's not that they are getting their regular wages at present. Even if they come back, then they will have this concern whether the government will help them to connect with their employers and bring some pressure on the employers through the diplomatic channel to pay their wages back. So there, I think the workers would require strong support from the government of India. There are a group of the workers, for example, those who work as domestic help, and they are by and large outside the labor laws purview. So they would require a special support from the government if they have to come back, and also if their wages have to be paid back to them. So I think we can actually classify people who are in different circumstances there in Gulf countries. If we have to prioritize people whom to bring back, as people have already said, that we don't have much idea about how many people are there at present, because we have data only of those who have gone through the proper channel. So all those who are undocumented, we don't have much idea about those workers. And there is another factor that some of the countries have started giving amnesty to undocumented workers. So there will be further pressure on the government to bring back those workers also, about whom we have very little information. So I would say that we have to classify who are the first-time migrants. So generally those who have migrated for the first time, so they have already spent a lot of money on their migration. So that means they have paid money for their passport, for the visa, the recruitment agencies, particularly most of them which are also undocumented agencies, and they charge very exorbitant charges from the workers. And many of these workers would have actually borrowed money, so they would be indebted, and they have to come back, and they will be jobless here. So, and if they have to go back, then they have to borrow money again. So that means this category of workers are one of the most vulnerable workers. So we have to think about those who have been rendered jobless, those who are in low skills, those who are low earning migrants, those who have recently migrated, and particularly a certain category of vulnerable workers, for example, women workers, those who have singly migrated, particularly those who are domestic workers. So that's one part where you have to support the migrants in the host countries, in Gulf countries, and there I think some kind of strategizing is required, and I think the government has to also scale up. And if there are more workers who want to come back, if they are facing problems there, then the government has to scale up the capacity to bring these workers back, and also identify those groups of workers who are not in a position to pay for their return ticket. And I think on humanitarian ground, the government of India must bear the cost of their return. Not only that, not only the from Gulf countries to the port of in the disembarkment in India, but also from that point to their home, the government should make arrangements for their proper transport within the country also. And then I think they would require because the chances of their infection is very high. Returning immigrants, it's not just the screening. I think their proper test will be required, and you have to also make arrangements for very strict quarantine, and if treatment is required, then for proper treatment. And that's one part of that which is related to their at present their stay in Gulf countries and also their return. But upon return, I think again you have to also realize that different states have different capacity to deal with this crisis. For example, where a state like Kerala, which has a very long history of immigration, and where the remittance constitutes a very large part of the state domestic product, so their capacity and also the impact on that state's economy will be different from the impact this is going to cause on a state like Bihar or UP, and also the coping capacity of states like Bihar and UP will be quite different. So one thing is clear, that the remittances, perhaps they constitute a smaller say proportion in the overall economy of states like Bihar and UP, although per capita remittance is in case of international migrants is much higher than in case of domestic migrants, but still I think that is not the major worry in states like Bihar and UP, but the major worry lies in terms of say rehabilitating these people. Now this is really going to be very difficult in Bihar because there is already very high pressure on land. Most of the poor people, those who are landless, and there is almost 42% of landlessness, 42 to 48% of landlessness in Bihar. And to some extent, people augment their the land holding by tenancy. But gradually, tenancy is also declining, and more landholders are recoursing to self-cultivation. So the pressure is already high. Abundance of labor is indisputable fact of Bihar, UP, Odisha, Jharkhand or West Bengal. And also in these underdeveloped states, rural non-farm employment is highly underdeveloped. So what I'm trying to say that the capacity to absorb and re-employ and rehabilitate the return migrants in Bihar, UP, Odisha, Bengal, Jharkhand and similar say underdeveloped, for example, Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh, so these states have very little capacity actually to absorb. So some kind of support is required. You cannot think about these states absorbing the labor, but perhaps ICM and the External Affairs Ministry in say conjunction with other government departments, central government departments, have to take this responsibility. And sometimes the rehabilitation may happen outside these states, at least for a section of workers. Not all of them are going to be integrated locally. So, and then once the situation becomes acceptable and when the workers are in a position to go back, then I think a special is required to ensure that this, in case of re-immigration, they have support, particularly the kind of centralization process which we in Bihar. So we have to think about that process, either exploitation or at least, if it's not entirely possible, say less exploitative. We have to also gather more intelligence regarding opportunities in those places where the infection is quite less and from where the more demand is. At the same time, I think in rural areas, we need to strengthen food distribution system through PDS, and additional food distribution has to be actually extended for up to 1 year, because there will be additional load now of those people who are coming back and who are also have some there's additional requirements in this case. We also say that within the country we have to think about how to improve wages. So at present there is more unemployment, and so there is going to be downward pressure on wages. And has to take a special effort to ensure that the wages do not go below minimum wages. So
in about 1 minute, your conclusion, please.
Okay, yeah. Then I would also say that the government has to also encourage the migrant to form the cooperatives or MSMEs, and because they have the skill, if proper support can be given to them, then perhaps they can think about having their own enterprise here rather than migrating. But a section of them would definitely like to migrate. I don't see any other, say, alternative. Skill mapping, which it can be done so that they can be linked with the employers. But another worrying factor is that the traditional skills are, in medium term at least, are going to have less demand, because I think the industries will go for more robotic techniques, particularly after this kind of experience where human contact has actually brought their production process to halt. So that's why I think we need to have put more emphasis on medium and small scale industries which still rely more on human labor. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your very useful, very valuable contribution. I think you have highlighted some of the points made earlier, but your plea for different states having different needs and therefore deserving different responses is very well taken. I think that is a point which comes out very clearly, and as you said yourself, the states which are receiving of late the returnees, in fact, are also the states which are receiving the internal migrants as well within India, and therefore the pressure is even more, and we have to keep that in mind. Dear friends, thank you very much. I am very grateful to the panelists for being so cooperative with me and so self-disciplined. We have run through excellent presentations, and this is now, I think, time to take a few questions. Now, I do not know whether I'll be able to get the questions on my screen, but maybe Surabhi will help me. And I think if we could get some questions, that would be wonderful. I think what we can do certainly is in some kind of a systematic treatment. Let me invite very brief remarks or interventions or questions or comments by people who are really charged with the responsibility to look after the welfare of the immigrants. And in that light, let me invite Shri Amrit Lugun, Protector General of Immigrants, who has this broad responsibility on behalf of the government and the country to look after the community of immigrants, perhaps to make a brief intervention, and then we can go down talking to some of his other colleagues which are operating from different parts of the country. Amrit Lugun.
Yeah, am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
So thank you very much for this brief presentations, and it was very interesting from the point of view of both returnee migrants and also people going abroad. In the e-migrate system, as has already been pointed out, there is a slight limitation in the sense that for capturing the skills and the profession of employees, since it is not mandatory, it is only mandatory for those people who need to take clearance. And since November 2017, we also started the voluntary registration of people who wanted to register. So we have some data about that, and among the return migrants, because all the Gulf countries, of course, fall under, we call immigration check required countries. So all the people coming from the Gulf countries, whomsoever's record we could find in the e-migrate, we have mapped it, and as Secretary said, we are sharing with the states with those. And also in wherever our missions are taking data of the return migrants who are registering, wherever they are able to capture the skill set, so that also we can, once we collect those data, we will be sharing with the states. But in general, I would also like to say that as everybody raised, one common feature in all the presentations was the need to upgrade skills to the contemporary level. And that is where the main challenge lies. Some of the persons who started in the Gulf countries with a particular skill which may not be relevant, but however they got employment, say as a carpenter or as a mason or as a builder in Gulf countries. So they have been exposed to some of the latest machines, because the Gulf countries, as you know, they import all the latest technology, the lathe machines, for example, the fitting machines, etc. So these people have been managed to upgrade their skills. Now, when these people are returning after losing their jobs or completion of the projects or whatever reason, so these people are already at a particular skill. Now, as the CII may become very handy in that, so we'll see if they can get those certifications. I don't know how many of them have got it, because that point had not been stressed till the crisis has happened. But from their own point of view, quite a number of them may be having some sort of certification. So those skills, if they can be used by the industry, that is a big potential for us. And also within the India itself, as pointed out by the last speaker, that a lot of this interstate migration, because it is a correct view that in the last 10 to 15 years, the traditional low-skilled people or at the poor end, like 20 years back, most of such migrants in the workers category used to be from the southern states, the majority from Kerala, or then closely followed by Tamil Nadu, Andhra. But in the last 15 years, majority who had gone were from states like Bihar, UP, Bengal, to some extent, and Odisha. So the challenge now will be from these states. Now they are facing a large returnees on which they may not have envisioned till this crisis happened. So there the challenge will lie, and as has been pointed out, these states are already facing huge population and employment problems. So the challenge will be how to rehabilitate that. So from in the Ministry of External Affairs, we can provide a link, and also in fact in the e-migrate also, which is an important platform which captures data. We are also coming up with a version 2 of e-migrate. In fact, we are just in the advanced stage of launching this project. So some of the suggestions and presentations and further comments which will be made, we will try to incorporate how we can provide a better linkage between the migrants and the states here and the industry, etc. So this is what I would like to say at this moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. In fact, this is the great significance of this interaction, that academics and domain experts are able to talk directly to the senior officials and policy makers, and I'm very happy that this very unique opportunity has been created here. May I now invite Mr. Sao, who is the protector of immigrant from Mumbai, based in Mumbai, to make a few remarks. Mr. Sao?
Yeah, namaskar everybody. I would just like to add that with the guidance of PG sir, we have been compiling data for distressed immigrants who for the various reasons want to come back, and then that data basically we had compiled with the information of state of residence and the job skills. So we have compiled quite a few, and a majority of them have been those immigrants who are gone on short-term visas, and their visas have basically over. Those are the data they have compiled, and the stressed immigrants are due to different other reasons like job, and different people. And also a few cases we have come across, like some of the immigrants have basically tested positive for COVID-19, and all those things we have been basically sharing with Indian Embassy, and data, all those things we have shared. So with Mumbai, we are basically compiling the data so that we will be able to share it with state and with the sets. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your contribution. We have actually, as our experts know, a very large number of POEs who are located in various locations in the states. I have a whole list here in order to make sure that time-wise we are doing okay. Now I really throw it open to all the POEs, those especially who are located in Hyderabad, Trivandrum, Bareilly, Kolkata, whoever wishes to address the gathering is most welcome to do so, because then it would be much easier and better. So anybody who wishes to say, or Mr. Lugun, you would like to direct one of your colleagues to talk about it, he's most welcome.
Sir, this is POE Delhi, sir. I may be allowed to say something.
Yes, yes, Mr. Yadav, go ahead.
Sir, as I had mentioned in the last meeting which ILO had taken up, the issue of wages of returnee workers is of paramount importance. That the sole reason why these workers went abroad was to earn a livelihood and to send money back home to support their families. I know this is a very emergency-like situation. There is a shutdown in countries abroad also. But as far as possible, if the wages of most of the workers are settled before they embark on their journey to India, will be of great help not only for them but also for all the POEs and Government of India. Otherwise, it will open up unexpected large number of grievances to be settled by POEs and other government authorities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, a very valuable suggestion. Of course, these are extraordinary times, and one has to sort of see how much leverage our admissions have in terms of persuading the local authorities in the Gulf to be able to respond to this very legitimate and valid request otherwise.
Sir, if I may briefly intervene, sir.
Yes,
POE Bareilly has a few questions, so if he can briefly address whatever questions that he has.
Sure. Is that Mr. Sharma? Surabhi, we have lost your voice.
I'll read out what he asked because it's not confirmed.
Sure.
So the interventions were, can the skilled migrants be useful apart from government schemes? Also in assimilating best practices and skills into the training of our training institutes under PMKVY and state skills development missions apart from learning from their experience to update our PDOT systems in future. And he also made a suggestion that collection of data can be at 3 points, either before departure, during journey, or through small formats. And he also had written that most of the returnees are worried about last mile connectivity. For example, how a person returning from UAE arriving at Mumbai will reach Gorakhpur. Some clarity. So those were his interviews.
So I think I'll make a move for South Block now. It's 4:45, right? Yeah. Move. And I'll come back afterwards.
And if any other POEs would want to make their interventions, then we briefly take theirs and then we move to the next lot.
Would any other colleague, POE, would wish to make an intervention? I hope.
Good afternoon, sir.
Yes.
This is POE Kolkata here.
Good afternoon.
I'd like to say something, sir.
Are you Mr. Haldar?
Yes, sir.
Very good.
Sir, it is a good fact that there is no much such scope to explore or get a job in West Bengal for the immigrants who are returning from home, returning from abroad through our Operation Vande Mataram. As there were so many industries had shut down their operations during the last regime, and same practice is still continuing. The new industries are yet to be established. Due to the over density in West Bengal, people are jobless and the young generation is struggling to get a job nowadays. The unemployment is growing in the state day by day. Hence, it will be very difficult for the immigrants, whether they are ECR or ECNR, to get a job here on arrival. They have to explore the availability of the job in the local market, which is a time-consuming matter. The same scenario may be applicable to other neighboring states also. The job availability in the local market is with the low salary compared to the salaries they are getting from their foreign employer. I think, sir, it will be a better idea if the skilled immigrants may be accommodated.
Yes.
And employment exchange or employment bank for the skilled immigrants, and the same thing may be shared with the private sector under the Skilled India, under the Making India program for recruitment. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. You have, of course, made a very strong point from the viewpoint of where you are working. This is actually a phenomenon across the country. It is logical for someone who belongs to a particular part of the country to come back to that part, and clearly when he joins the queue of the jobless people, the queue becomes bigger, and we all are fully aware that there is a strong domestic dimension to this issue. Thank you very much. Do we have another intervention?
Can I come please? I'm Sumati Vasudev, Bhimati, Chennai.
Ma'am, you're audible.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. Everybody, good evening. Actually, I'm in constant interaction with the RAs here. They feel it's a little premature to get the correct data of the migrants from countries abroad, because their return could also they could also depend on the policies of the host countries. Because how much we would like to keep in employment, how much people will be able to retain, or how will they send back. According to them, it's a little premature to give the exact number of the immigrants wishing to return or continue in employment, etc. And we have not been able to get the figures very quickly, so because only after the lockdown 3 ends on Monday, we could see more data coming in. This is the position Chennai RAs are taking, so that we should wait for sometimes for the foreign employers to take a call and tell us how much they could retain, etc. This one view coming from the RAs. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank
So
you very
maybe
much.
we can move on to the state RAs and thereafter the private RAs to listen.
Yes, certainly. So let us also hear from another very important stakeholder in this whole spectacle or phenomenon of returning migrants, and we are now moving to the state recruitment agencies, SRAs. We have, I think, representatives of a number of them, perhaps NSDC,
come here for a moment.
NACOM, so and EIL, FICCI, whichever institutions which are represented here. If you wish to take the floor and share your input, your reaction or comments, we would very much welcome it. From NSDC, is somebody interested to take the floor?
So in that case, we move to, I know RSLDC has a point to make. So if Mr. Jain from RSLDC, sir, if you can briefly, in 2 minutes, give your intervention in this meeting.
Yes, Mr. Jain, you are most welcome. Mr. Jain? Yeah.
We have got the data of 50% immigrants coming to countries like Rajasthan, then we will be able to get job opportunities by employment. We are planning to have a team of district officials, which is comprised district employment officers, district labor officers, the GMDI, and our district coordinators. They will identify the skill set and the requirements of the particular industry, and they will coordinate and arrange the reskilling and upskilling of those workers who are coming back, and will deploy the people. And as the Prime Minister has rightly said, vocal for local. So we are trying to tap the local potential. Once the workers reach at their destination, we will try to find out what the opportunity, what the type of raw material is available in those areas, where some industries can be set up, small scale industry or micro industry where it can be set up. We will provide some financial assistance. Our government has taken a view and we have made a policy that the workers who are coming back from the different countries will be getting benefited loans. Like we will be providing some subsidy to them. So in that case, we can rehabilitate and we can repatriate them in well manner. Our additional Chief Secretary Industry Department has been designated as nodal officer for this all operations. So that we will take care of everybody. Let us come over here, sir. We have got some points in our mind. We will channelize this and we will pull our all resources to get them employed. Data bank will be required for providing the all services. And my suggestion will be, in case ministry can think of providing some type of fixed stipend or fixed type of the remuneration or amount I say to the state government for their workers for 2-3 months, so that we could get some time to explore the possibility of providing some job opportunities or something else. That will be better, sir, if you can consider. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jain. Now we'll move to Norca, and if anybody from Norca wants to make any comment. If any of the state government RAs want to make any comments, we are taking that. Sir, I think we have lost. Mr. Swami, if you want to say, so, Mr. Swami, can you hear us?
Yeah.
Briefly make your intervention.
Yeah, I'm Dr. Swami. Hi to all. Whatever the suggestions and deliberations, discussions, they were all productive. Thanks for that. But here there is one more item which need to be addressed. That is the expectations of returnee Gulf migrants. Our earlier experience, we tried to rehabilitate them and provide them jobs, but their immediate expectation was some financial support. They said we have taken a loan of some 2 lakhs, 1 lakh. So the first thing is we have to repay the loan. Second thing, regarding providing jobs to them in the local industry, their complaint was that the salaries were very low. So for construction workers here in industry in India, like Hyderabad, they are offering some 10,000, where in Gulf countries they have been getting like 20,000 plus 40. That is the other issue. Then there are opportunities as well in this regard. See, somebody was talking on skill upgradation. So for which we need to assess what skills they have right now. Maybe a paper doesn't show the skills that they have. So for that skill assessment, again the question comes, who is assessing the skills? Is he capable? So from these Gulf returnees and from the skill providers, international skill providers like NSDC, they have started a new project like IAC. We need to have that to be structured in place, assessing the skills. Based upon the skills that they have, maybe we have to provide skill upgradation to meet the standards of a job in a foreign country. For example, I am talking about a basic skill like a housemaid, or what we call it as female domestic worker. In Kuwait, they get about 25,000 to 30,000. If they are coming back, their expectation will be they would like to have more technical skills so that they can be placed elsewhere. There is a huge demand now in health sector and facility management sector. See, the nurses are a lot of invitations we have been receiving. They are required in US, they are required in UK, they are required in Germany, they are required in New Zealand. The only issue is making our nurses capable of meeting those standards. It will be a big challenge. It is higher side anyway, that maybe English language, the clinical practices and other. So there is an opportunity. And Avna from CIA was talking about the technical skills like bypass, welders. See, again, these like, no, there is a skill gap. It has to be, a skill gap analysis has to be made systematically. Maybe our program, like, no, the program of the government of India, which is launched, Pravasi Kausal Yojana. Maybe with all these ingredients, it may have to be structured in a better way to meet this demand, because it is a skill gain to India to certain extent. Like, no, it is not a skill loss. It is a skill gain to certain extent. Maybe these skills, whatever they have acquired, should not be wasted. If at all they are not to be wasted, means we have to plan a strategy so that effectively we can utilize those skills for building India. That's my recommendation. And our state government is doing all the efforts. We have some 30,000 people registered, and the primary priority now is like, no, receiving them, putting them in quarantine, at least making them safe. Then comes having their skill registry and planning some skill programs to them and facilitating them depending upon their qualification and skill set. Maybe we will have to sit together and discuss this, as you have said. Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Dr. Swami. Sir, I throw the floor open to other participants if they wish to ask anything. So you may take them.
Yes, thank you very much, because I really at this stage also want to show the due courtesies to the panelists you know, before I highlight some of the very clear takeaways that are emerging from this dialogue, I think I would very much like to still give say half a minute or so to each of the panelists, so that, you know, it's quite possible that they've been hearing so many other things and they want to say something. So unless you have now somebody else very pressing, I could follow that procedure. We have about 5-6 minutes to conclude. Is that okay?
So maybe we can take one or two more interventions and then we close it.
Sure. I will go by you. You are
so
the mastermind.
very briefly, we'll take just two more interventions. So please keep yourself very brief.
All right. Anyone listening?
I think Sita was there from ILO who wanted to make a point. Sita, are you listening?
Yes, I am. Thanks very much.
Yes, please be brief and quickly make your point.
Please
I have 3 or 4 points actually. One is that we must kind of optimize on the perception of Indians that we have as high skilled, both for the health sector as well as actually for the IT sector. I think these are sectors where we have outstanding kind of perception overseas, and we must utilize that to our benefit, even as we nuance and balance the health sector for ourselves in the country. But one of those things linked to that may be actually looking at SSAs and looking at social security agreements, which actually open us the opportunity now to relook at them, particularly because we've had this health emergency in the world, and to relook at them because some of our workers are going to continue staying in those countries, and that's how we're going to be able to optimize them perhaps. One or two other things that I would also like to add is that the PMKVY, the skills, you know, that is with the MEA, it would be good to focus on RPL. You know, there's been skill training for a long time, but at this stage when we have returnees coming back, it may be the recognition of prior learning that we really need to focus on rather than new skilling opportunities that we are focusing on. And I think that would be really helpful. One additional point, and this is my last point, is that there are regularizations happening in the world. Bahrain has done some, Italy is doing some. The chances are other countries are also doing some. We really need to you know, our embassies and maybe the community support structures that are there, we really need to optimize and use these opportunities for our workers. This means that our workers who may not have all the correct papers can actually take advantage of these situations. And at a time like this, when people really cannot travel and we need to try and secure jobs of people, this may actually be a really good opportunity for us to work with. That's it. Thank you.
Excellent.
Any more questions? We just take a quick questions and then we close. All our participants, if we can just, if nobody has a question, then we move towards the panelists.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Surabhi. Is that okay?
I think, sir, because I think the participants can see the questions on their chat box, so they can answer.
Sure. I think what we always can do is, if there are unanswered questions, I'm sure ICM can gather them together and find a way to get the answers from the experts. I think it's only proper at this stage if I, as moderator, test the succinct articulation skills, fit for television of our panelists. So, dear panelists, last 30 seconds or so for you to give your parting thought, so that you are able to be sure that the policymakers are listening to you. So, shall we go now in the reverse order? And may I request Professor Pushpendra Kumar Singh to take the floor.
Okay. I went through all the comments and questions which have been here on my screen, and I think some of the points which have been raised by the participants are quite important. One is that we must ensure that the workers who leave Gulf countries before leaving, their wages are settled. I think it's very important. The last mile connectivity, somebody has said. So from port of disembarkation in India to their home, I think that's another important thing. One very important suggestion which has come, and I think which should be in our program and policy also, which is incentivizing legal migration, because we know that there's a huge problem of undocumented migration, and that creates a lot of problems regarding securing the rights of the migrants who go to Gulf countries. So I think that's very, very important. And another point which have been raised, which again I think very important, is the person from West Bengal raised about no scope of local employment, which is already stressed in West Bengal. So I think we have to now think as a country, rather than this person is from Bihar or this person is from Bengal or from Kerala. And as a whole, we have to make plans how we are going to deploy this skilled workforce which is coming back from Gulf countries. I think it's very important at this stage. And one more thing, which is not in sync with the current policies of the government, but I think some of the points which have been raised here by people forces us to rethink. This is all about the wages. The local wages are quite depressed, and at this stage we have to think about how to give a big push. Though this is very adverse situation for giving any big push for wages in local markets, but unless wages are improved or there is cash support to the people who are coming back and who are jobless, either of these two or a combination of these of both, I think will go a long way in ensuring that the brain gain which we have got, unfortunately, under these circumstances, can be utilized in our benefit.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Bhavna ji, it is for you to go now.
Yeah. So this morning I was reading that a panel of ministers has discussed the need for merging of the NREGA scheme with the reskilling and the skilling schemes that are available. I have about 10 years experience in skills, and I have a deep understanding of the way skills ecosystem runs in this country. It is not a difficult job even to do an assessment of the current skills that these workers are coming back with. We have the tools, we have the technologies which are available. Fortunately for us, the world has started thinking digitally. It is even possible to map those skills as they come in. So if the experience certificates are there, no problem. We still go ahead and do it. And the mapping to jobs has to start, and that's where the MSD will need to focus on. And it's a great opportunity to focus on Industry 4.0 skills as well. So I see.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Professor Bhagat. Professor Bhagat, would you like to say something at this stage, or okay, we can't reach him somehow. So
thank you.
We can.
Thank you. A lot of talk has gone on skill development and skill upgradation. So this is very important area, and migrants will come with some skills, and some of them may not like to get the job, but they may be entrepreneurs They may create job also because of some gain in skills they have got in the place of destination. So it needs to be who wants what, and therefore I like to recall here that the migration survey is very important. Kerala has done 8 migration survey from 1998 to 2018 under the aegis of Center for Development Study. Such type of migration studies where skill mapping and the requirement of the people, internal migrant, external migrants, and the need assessment which can be done. I think that is very, very important, and each state should try to do that and integrate with development. That's mine.
Thank you very much. Very much appreciated. Nehaji, you have the final last word.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to agree with my co-panelists and especially with what Professor Bhagat said, that I think data is really valuable. And perhaps we could start with states which are major source states, perhaps internally as well as internationally, to start looking at surveys which give us much more evidence to base our policies on. I'm also going to agree with Bhavna very, very wholeheartedly that, you know, while skill upgradation is really essential, one must also look at other destination countries. Because in the Gulf market, you know, you also have African countries coming in a very big way. So how do we promote our workers? And like Sita said, how do we pitch for India having a skilled workforce, right? And how do we turn low-skilled types of work into better skilled types of work? So even in the case of domestic workers, right, to actually position them in a way where they can actually lead the market in much the way Filipino workers, domestic workers do in the rest of the country. I'm also going to try and you know, put my weight on the fact that I think this has come up very nicely. This is also coming up in discussion on internal migration, that employment exchanges or matching skills with demand is really, really essential. So if we are going to do it for internal migrants in India, maybe there has to be a way of working it out where international migrants and internal migrants can actually be reached out through some sort of matching and exchange platform that would really be useful. And again, I think Kerala is an outlier. We will see workers coming back to all districts in Kerala in very large numbers. But I really think registering skill, registering who leaves for work is essential. And I think our systems really need to have that in place, much like other countries do. Thanks, Surabhi, and thank you, ICM, for
Thank you very much for your last comments. I think we are reaching the stage where we would need now to conclude this. As your moderator, normally I would wish to take a couple of minutes to highlight some of the important takeaways, but I think we are running out of time. Drawing from my experience of 36 years in the diplomatic service, when I had the chance to work in 5 major countries with very large Indian diaspora, I can say that this is quite an unprecedented situation that the country and the government are facing. There is no doubt that we have to move from the general to particular, from the theoretical to the practical aspects. Clearly in that, you know, the plea that was made for a very nuanced and very calibrated approach, a approach born of study of data, obviously is a very important argument that has come up today. In a sophisticated manner, countries' experts are saying that we don't really know fully about these returning migrants, and therefore how do we help them? Therefore, I think whatever machinery we have, protector of immigrants, the embassies, the state governments, I think they all will have to work collectively to improve and be very clear as to who are these people, where they are coming from, where they are going, what are their skills, what sort of experience they have. I think that fundamental deficit in our knowledge has to be remedied as quickly as possible. This is one major takeaway from our dialogue today. And without going too much into the other 6 or 7 points which I had jotted down, I would just highlight the second major takeaway, which is that we also are beginning to have some idea as to where the skills and the jobs are. We all know that economy is contracting, there is joblessness, etc. But it comes as quite a revelation that there are indeed jobs, there are still skills in demand, there are other countries asking for our help, and therefore to my practical mind, what comes out clearly is that ICM's job is truly cut out. I think you really need to have a follow-up dialogue which can be set up with the help of Bhavna ji, and if she agrees, it could be broadened in terms of bringing in representatives of the other apex chambers of the country, because CII is the front rank saying we have so much available. I have no doubt the others would also buttress that argument, and therefore if we can locate as to where the skills and the jobs and opportunities are, then we would be doing a great service to the government in terms of linking the demand and the supply. So let me at this stage do my most pleasant duty to first of all thank our wonderful panelists. They have really enriched all of us collectively, and I would also like to thank ICM and the Ministry of External Affairs once again. And at this stage, it's my privilege to invite Mr. Yogeshwar Sangwan, Joint Secretary, who is the Chief Executive of ICM, to address you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Secretary, sir, Ambassador Rajiv Bhatia, distinguished panelists, colleagues from the Ministry, ladies and gentlemen. We had a very enriching round of discussions today on how to integrate the people returning from the Gulf, the migrants from the Gulf. Migrant workers are our assets and also our cultural ambassadors. The Government of India is cognizant of this reality, and the spirit of ensuring the safety and welfare of migrant workers pervades all our efforts, the most recent of which is the ongoing Vande Bharat and Sagar mission. COVID-19 has brought in new realities of work and workplace, and while we continue to battle the pandemic, it is important that there exists a roadmap that facilitates the reintegration of the returnee migrant workers. This virtual discussion is the first step towards listening to the views of the myriad stakeholders ranging from experts with years of research behind them, international organizations, recruiters, NGOs, and colleagues from the MEA. Going ahead, ICM will organize more such virtual discussions that will contribute towards policy recommendations in this regard. I thank all of you who joined in this discussion today, and I look forward to your continued engagement with ICM in the future as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. As a general request, may I request all of you to turn on your videos in your portal so that we can click a quick snapshot of everyone. So, yes, that's great. Maybe one more minute and we'll disconnect. Okay, so we had our pictures. Thank you so much for everyone who joined and made this discussion really enriching. And I thank Ambassador Bhatia for so deftly handling the proceedings. I thank the officials from the MEA who joined us, and I thank our CEO, who's been our motivating force, Sri Yogeshwar Sangwan, and our secretary, who's the spirit behind the discussion. So thank you all for joining us today evening. Please continue doing more such discussions going ahead with all the participants who joined us, and dealing with more issues and doing a follow-up discussion as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.